The Hive is a very early rail shooter game that was originally released for the Windows PC or Windows 95 and was later ported to the PlayStation early on in 1996, that sees you playing as a character that must infiltrate a compound that has been known to create genetically engineered strains of a deadly toxin that could literally wipe out the planet and even the universe. So your job is to try and get as close as you can in order to stop the imposing threat. So that will consist of you being able to fly your ship and just to literally destroy everything that moves, playing almost like an interactive movie. If you've played any other type of rail shooter, either in the arcades or that other ones that were also seen on the PlayStation, there's many of them that you can choose from. There's the likes of Galaxian 3, Starblade Alpha that were released by Namco, along with a list of many other games that were released in Japan only, many of them ports of arcade titles, and it was a popular genre and concept back in the day. And while the Windows version was heavily praised for its graphics and unique gameplay presence at the time, the PlayStation version unfortunately didn't receive the same results with regards to its reception. That the game was praised for its graphics to some degree, but lacked some of the visual quality of the PC version, and also criticised many elements of the gameplay, but with the main gripe being the control system, with the cursor being moving very very slowly in order to aim at enemies and other items, trying to shoot them. That can lead to a lot of frustration, even your downfall in many cases, as even I know from spending time playing this game. Compared to some other shooters out there, this is definitely a very very tough game. To get the best out of this, you would be better to play with, like, say, a mouse peripheral more so than a controller. The controller just doesn't have the same fluidity with regards to the overall movement as, say, a mouse would, or say a light gun. So I think that's where this game does fall short. Like, it is a nice idea and it is a really good early attempt at these type of games, and these games were really good at capturing your imagination, as everything felt like an interactive movie, which back in the early 90s was a revelation because there was nothing like it out there at the time. It really drew you in. While yes, the acting may not have been as good, but you definitely had the atmosphere and the tension that came along with it, and these games were able to capitalise on that, and this really is no different in that respect. But there will always be differences between the console versions and the PC versions. Even when you look at games that were ported from the arcades, those versions or anything that was made on a more higher end platform was always going to be better. They were always going to lack in some ways once they were ported to the console, so you can't really deny that at all. But it is a really good attempt, and it showed that the PlayStation was capable of doing and making these processes become a reality, even though they weren't as well received. I think mainly because most of the people looking at them were solely comparing it to the higher end element and just were looking more so for the negatives rather than the positives. But the very fact is that these games were playable and managed to even be seen on a console was something truly astounding for its time. Yes, it is tough, and there are certain parts in the game where you have different elements that you must be aware of, especially with different sequences. Early on in the game, there is a point where you're kind of going through like hyperspace and the ship is burning up, and you have to use the cursor and keep it within a certain amount of lines that appear on the screen. If you go over that, then the ship will explode. So you're trying to keep your ship almost like as if you have to keep it cool to stop it from overheating. So there's that element to it as well, that you have to be flexible in your movement. But that's, like I said, where the cursor and the control system does feel a little bit on the sluggish side, that it can take a bit of getting used to. But later on in the game, especially on some of the later levels, that's where it can really get tricky. I found myself that there were certain points that no matter what I did, I just could not get past it, because you could never react quick enough to enemy movements, because you'd be so low on health that even when you went to replay the game from the start, you'd still end up in the same point with the same issues, and you'd always find yourself getting absolutely slaughtered and having to replay the entirety of that portion of the level over and over again. And that's what will frustrate a lot of players. But for those that have managed to finish it, they will understand. They'll be able to persevere with that experience. But like, for a game that was released in the early or to mid 90s, and for your first few months of the PlayStation's launch period, it definitely is something breathtaking to behold, to see these games in action, as they were beyond anything else seen at the time. Like, when we look at it going back to the days of 2D games and then transitioning to 3D, to go into games like this here, while they seem simplistic in their nature because all you're really doing is shooting, but you're literally watching an entire movie play out in front of you, and you're just having basic interactions to get involved with, which is really really cool, although at the same time it is difficult. But back then it was totally unique, something that you never would have even dared or deemed possible. But yet here we are, and here we were witnessing it, which was something else for its time. But it is what it is. These games, they were always going to be tough. very little in terms of holding your hand with regards to getting into these games. You just have to put your time into it, be patient, and eventually you get the results. Now, these games generally are quite short for what they do offer, but it really just comes down to your own skill level to determine whether you're going to complete it or not. But it's still a unique piece of gaming history, and especially the history of the early days of the PlayStation. So it is interesting to go back and look at them and just to witness a unique era of just games development in general. And I would love to know your thoughts of this game if you have played it yourself and what you think of it overall. So be sure to share it down in the comments below. And if you have enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell to be updated with future videos. And if you would like to see more content around other types of unique rail shooters like this that were also released on the PlayStation, then you can check out the playlist on screen here to see more of those games in action. And as always, keep those gaming memories alive.